Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing.
Good morning and welcome to the regular council meeting town of Qualicum Beach. I want to acknowledge that we are holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, in particular our friends at the Qualicum First Nation. The agenda. There is a request for a late item regarding the field of crosses to honor veterans from World War I and II. And so that will be added under, well, at the end of the agenda. Just put it towards the end. Any other changes request? Then the agenda is adopted as amended. We had the consent agenda, and there's a number of council meeting minutes. Ms. Svensson, there were a couple of changes, corrections to the minutes?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So under the consent agenda, item 2C, we had an amendment to the October 16 minutes on page 13, striking Councillor Harrison and inserting Councillor Vander Valk to that set of minutes.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, and then under staff reports on the agenda, if we could strike 1A, it's redundant. We've announced that motion already.
Okay. Good, thank you. Any other errors or omissions? Then those are the minutes of the October 2nd, 9 and 16 are approved. No business arising. Delegations. Mr. Carl Murphy from the Qualicum Beach Pickleball Club. You have up to 5 minutes.
Good. All right, thank you. All right. Do you want a signal or anything like that? Or you can drive yourself, but if you prefer me. This here? All right. Good day. Carl Murphy with the Qualicum Beach Pickleball Club. Tennis courts are underutilized. 9 to noon is the most in demand, should be the busiest. I have time-stamped photos from 9:15 to 9:30 from Sunday, August the 25th through to Saturday the 31st, showing a total of 18 players. That's an average of 3 players a day. On 3 of those days, the courts were empty. There are 180 Qualicum Beach pickleball players registered in Parksville, and every day, a conservative estimate is that 30 players drive to Parksville and elsewhere to play outdoors. A valuable community resource is terribly underutilized. Pickleball would transform it into a vibrant community once again. We need outdoor courts. The QBPC has to play indoors, even in summer, when most players want to be outdoors, and it's stifling the growth of the QBPC. Our citizens have no choice but to travel and then spend their dollars somewhere other than QB. Environmental concern. Pickleball players drive an average of 25 kilometers round trip, resulting in over 100,000 kilometers a year. The one outdoor pickleball court isn't legal. It's a tennis net. Best practices, both the tennis and pickleball communities believe it doesn't include painting lines in the middle of the net and then pulling the net down. Town Council, please don't spend good money after bad. We're told the town's RFQ was to repaint the courts exactly the same way. Obviously, no one's told the town the best practice is what thousands of other communities have done. Paint 2 pickleball courts either side of the tennis net and use portable pickleball nets. We're not here to complain, we're here to present a solution. When the town repaints the courts, use best practices. Paint pickleball courts either side of the 2 tennis courts and use portable pickleball nets. Please note, 2 courts isn't enough. A pickleball club needs 4 to 6 to grow. That will result in less travel and more dollars spent within our town on gas, groceries, and dining out. It would allow Qualicum Beach to host tournaments, providing years of economic benefit. Paint 6 pickleball courts on the 2nd and 3rd tennis courts, leaving the first exclusively for tennis. Multiple lines on courts is in a shared community spaces. Oceanside Elementary School, you can see a picture here. If elementary school children can play on that, we know adults can. Multiple lines is an excuse, not a reason. The cost of adding 6 pickleball courts is lines only. I believe the town council has already budgeted resurfacing and repainting of the courts for 2025. Adding 6 pickleball courts would be a minimal additional cost of $2,750. This could easily be covered in your existing budget. However, QBPC will be applying for funds to cover it. We previously presented a tournament class alternative, which would be preferred by all. Add 13 feet to the end of the courts, resulting in 4 permanent pickleball courts and 2 permanent tennis courts, with a fence separating both for an additional cost of $45,000 to $50,000, a very low cost. Storage containers, 2 for $3,000. If no suitable site is provided, the pickleball community will transport portable pickleball nets. On-site storage is preferable, and if a site is provided, QBPC would buy them. My apologies. There. That's the... Okay, community concerns, noise levels. A decibel reader measured the sound at the courts of 75.5 decibels and across the street at the gardens at 55.9, both well within community standards. Future development. Any additional development in the area is down the road, possibly years, maybe never. Withholding approval on something that may never happen is simply unreasonable. Furthermore, QBPC specifically state, we accept that changes in area zoning or development may mean we can no longer play at that location. Economic impact of pickleball. Lack of outdoor courts is forcing your citizens to go elsewhere and spend their dollars there instead of QB. I attended one small 16-person tournament in Parksville, and after that, we all went for dinner and refreshments, but not in Qualicum Beach. There are countless more examples. The Oceanside Pickleball Club hosted 245 players for the 2024 Vancouver Island Pickleball Championships in 3 different locations. But no event could be held in Qualicum Beach, whereas 6 pickleball courts in Qualicum Beach would allow tournaments, resulting in significant economic benefit. Points I think we can all agree on. Whenever possible, community resources should be shared. The hamlet of Dunsmuir, only 2,000 people, has 3 courts, but is a round trip of 38 kilometers and 30 minutes. If a hamlet can justify 3 courts, surely QB with 10,000 people can justify 6 courts. Having outdoor pickleball courts would allow your citizens and out-of-towners to play, dine, and spend in QB. This is a win-win-win. Tennis has access to 2 to 3 newly finished courts. Pickleball has access to 4 to 6 courts, and Qualicum Beach gets a financial windfall for low dollars. We ask that pickleball courts be provided before the 2025 season, a location be designated for 1 to 2 storage boxes, and arrange a meeting with town staff to discuss proposal. I'll let our citizens have the last word. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Okay, any question to the delegation? I have one. I heard that the Rotary Club gave you, or the club, $4,000, which was then returned. Now, as you can see, it would take, even if we did it there, some cost. Why would you have returned a donation like that, if that's true?
That I am totally unaware of. Sandy, have you heard of anything about that?
No, it had been returned. I know that sometimes when we apply for grants, they want a specific plan. So they're willing to...
Please, you have to come to the microphone for people to hear.
When we do apply for grants, whoever we're applying to want a specific plan. So that money may be held until we have a specific plan. I'm not positive about that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Do you have hard copies of this? Because
Yes.
obviously the 2 councillors aren't here, and they will watch this online at some point, but it would be good to have a hard copy to distribute.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bylaws. Town of Qualicum Beach tax exemption 904-2024 for adoption. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, discussion? In favor? Opposed? It carried. And then we have the same for places of worship, 905-2024, also for adoption. Councillor Vander, Councillor Skipsey. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? If any, carried. Thank you. Committee and liaison reports. There's just a couple of things that I thought I might report on this time. One, yesterday we paid some respect to the family of George Holm. Many of you probably don't know that name, but he was the board chair for a number of years and a director for many years and the first fire chief in Nanuus, and he actually had experience with that in Qualicum Beach Fire Department. George William Holm passed away, and he was my first chair when I first joined the regional district. And watching him debates with Jack McLean from Area F and Larry McNabb, the city councillor of Nanaimo, was inspiring. They didn't pull any punches. I thought, wow, this is a good, interesting place. But then afterwards, we'd go, not these particular guys, but we play a round of golf and had a beer afterwards. And it was fun. George could be a hard driver. He didn't like anybody speaking twice. You said your piece, and that's enough. And if you wanted to raise your hand again, he'd frown at you, like, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you say that the first time? So he was quite a character, and through him, the fire department got started in Nanuus. He also was a keen supporter of having regional parks, and even convinced me at that time on the board with the support of council to raise parcel taxes that everybody in the regional district pays to acquire large portions of parks. Mount Benson, Moorcroft Camp, places all over that. In the past, people said, well, that's that area, they should pay for it, or this municipality should pay for it. But by working together, we managed to acquire large sections of land. So that was a good thing. And then I had the honor of presenting long service awards to a number of paramedics. One was named as Cliff Burgum, who served as a volunteer, but not as a volunteer, but he served for 35 years as your paramedic. People had left letters in the door who he had, I guess, picked up and taken to the hospital and helped them along the way, letters of appreciation. So their boss from the whole area organization asked if I would join him by presenting letters of commendation. So I did that on your behalf. Thank you. And then I have a motion that is to appoint Councillor Vander to be the liaison to the Qualicum Beach Farmers Market. So I make that motion. Seconded by Councillor Skipsey. Discussion? In favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a few comments. First, I would like to publicly thank former MLA Adam Walker for his service to this community. Adam never shied away from tough conversations and always made himself available to anyone in the community who needed assistance. And so I would just like to wish him well as we go forward. I attended the open house for the RDN that they put on for those who are impacted by the new mandatory waste separation. So that would be businesses, multifamily units, and institutions. And they did have guides available for each of these areas. I just thought I would, like, there's one here for restaurants, one for hotels, one about bags, and one about bins. And so all of that information is available on the RDN website or by contacting the RDN. They also provided a list of all the waste haulers. So that information is available, and that new regulation, for those who don't know, is coming into effect on January 1st, 2025. And so, yeah, I just thought I would provide that update. And then the other thing was that the mayor and I attended the museum, Qualicum Beach Museum's AGM yesterday. Unfortunately, Councillor Young wasn't able to get there right away. She did manage to get there eventually. But it was very good, and they do have a couple of things coming up that I thought I would mention, and that is that currently they are preparing for a Kids Spooky Day on October 31st, which will feature educational activities and displays around Vancouver Island bats. Apparently, Lorraine, who is the museum manager, is now a BAT ambassador, has taken the training. So there'll be fun activities, especially for younger children. And then in November, they will be hosting a traveling exhibition from the Canadian War Museum called Fighting in Flanders, Gas, Mud, Memory. It will be accompanied by a small exhibit sharing the experiences of Qualicum Beach residents who served in the First World War. So that will be coming, I think it starts November 6th or something, but you could check their website for more information. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Vander.
Thank you. I have my written report once again, and don't have much to add to that at this point, other than I did attend the gala opening of the season for the village, or for the Echo players, and at the Village Theatre, and would encourage everyone to join in to watch the play, Cheshire Cats, and also to perhaps contribute to their Take a Seat campaign, which is a fundraiser. They want to replace all the seats in the theater, and you can buy a seat there, and I think you get your name put on the seat. Yes, yeah, if you want. So that is available for those of you that feel so inclined. And that's about it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's another good example of how people in this community, when they want something, they don't automatically come to the taxpayers. They really do a fundraiser. And they've raised, I think, so far already $90,000 to replace the seats and the flooring. And that shows a commitment that they're willing to help. I don't think they're going to come to the town at all for any money, but for people who enjoy the theater to contribute to it. All right, thank you. Next is the staff reports. Ms. Varela. Or Ms. Svensson.
I'll hand that to Corporate Services, Your Worship. Thank you.
If you'd like, I could do the late item now, which is under Corporate Services. If you're okay with that?
Yeah, I had put it on the agenda at the end, but if council is agreeable, we can deal with it right now. Go ahead.
Okay. So the late item is the request from the Field of Crosses to honor veterans from World War I and II, similar to has been done in past years, where they'll erect the Field of Crosses on the grass area, kitty corner to the Qualicum Beach Curling Club on Railway between the railroad tracks and the road. And so we have a resolution there.
Thank you. I'll move that resolution. Seconded, Councillor Skipsey. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Svensson. That's it for Corporate Services?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Finance, Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have a request for council to approve a grant application for implementation and operationalization of asset management. So there is a grant available through through UBCM for $12,500, and so this resolution is requesting council's authorization to apply for that grant.
Thank you. What is council's wish? Councillor Skipsey moved. Councillor Vander seconding. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you. That concludes your report. Thank you. And thank you for all the work both of you and your staff have done from administrative side to prepare us for the strategic planning. Without the finance picture, it wouldn't work. Thank you. Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The next item on the agenda is a development permit application for 149 First Avenue West. This was reviewed at the earlier October meeting and subsequently reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission. Just a little bit of background on this. This property is located on First Avenue West. It's a very narrow residential property that has a laneway access to the north, to the rear side, and accesses First Avenue West on the front. The proposal is a building essentially located in the center of the lot, and the proposed access is a driveway here for 2 of the dwelling units and a driveway on the rear side, accessed via the lane for the other 2 dwelling units. This is a perspective rendering of the overall proposal. So essentially it's 2 units here on the front, Each of them is 2 stories, so 1 unit on the left, 1 unit on the right, and this proposal is mirrored on the back side. Another perspective. Before I go on to the trees, I'll just mention, so council did refer this to the Advisory Planning Commission with a request that there be comments on a few specific items. So one of the items was on compliance with the town's new design guidelines, which were adopted in June of this year. The second was a request for them to review the proposed access to the site, specifically, whether the access should be as shown or perhaps to include a variance to the parking so that the access on First Avenue was not required. So they did discuss that. And the third proposal, or third request, which came from council, was that the Advisory Planning Commission provide comment on whether the building could perhaps be shifted to provide all the parking on one side or the other. So the Advisory Planning Commission did review those 3 items, and they didn't recommend changing the access. They didn't recommend changing the building. However, they did have some recommendations for improvements in terms of the aesthetics of the building and also the functionality. So some of the recommendations were they recommended a little bit more of a roof overhang above those upper decks, and they felt that that would make the upper spaces more functional. They also recommended that some alternative color to white be explored. So this comes into the discussion because it's just a reminder to council that the development permit area guidelines are kind of the goalposts, or so they're the guiding reference when it comes to things like color and form and character. So the recommendations from the Advisory Planning Commission, for example, the color white, it's true a lot of new buildings are white, and that may end up being a trend that dates buildings in this era. However, the design guidelines do specifically identify that white is one of the recommended base colors. So that's an example of where the APC identified a potential opportunity for improvement. I agree, some color might very well make the building pop a little bit more and stand out. However, it doesn't conflict with the design guidelines. So I think my understanding is that the applicant listened to all those comments, and they are actually considering some of the changes recommended by the Advisory Planning Commission, for example, maybe extending some of those roof lines. However, from the perspective of staff, those weren't indications of any conflict with the design guidelines. I would like to address the trees because there are a few questions that came up, not about the development permit review, because it's not with regard to the form and character guidelines, but trees are very important, and so I do want to take this opportunity to just clarify what the proposal would mean for the trees in the area. So this is in your package. It's entirely probably illegible for the most part on the screen before you, but these 3 trees here in the front are on the subject property. So there's 3 trees on the First Avenue side, and on the rear side, the trees are actually not on the subject property. So they would be either in the town laneway or they'd be on the parcel to the north. So that's private property on the north side. And I would just flag that in the package, the arborist misidentified this. It says that all 9 TQB trees in laneway. That's not correct. Some of those are actually on the property to the north. And I do also want to make sure it's clear what this chart means. Also, apologies, it's illegible, but in the package, it's page 58 if you want to look at this. So where you see in the table, it says TPZ required, or sometimes it says TPZ required or removal. So that means tree protection zone. So in other words, the arborist is flagging that if the tree is retained, then it's going to require tree protection in accordance with the tree protection bylaw. So the arborist report actually includes the fencing diagram, which is included in the town's bylaw. So in other words, when you look at the actual tree removals, the 3 trees in the front, nearing front First Avenue, those would require removal. The trees in the laneway to be determined. If they can be saved, they will be. If they don't need to be removed for access, and the trees that are retained would require tree protection. So fencing and root protection for those. The development permit does include minor variance to the minimum aggregate for the interior lot lines. So if council does advance this, there would be a variance included, which would vary the minimum aggregate distance for the sides from a total of 4.5 meters to 3 meters. The recommendation for council today is that the development permit be issued in accordance with the details in the memo. Thank you, Mayor Westbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Sales. Council make a motion to that effect? Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Vander, Valk seconding. Discussion. Councillor Skipsey first.
Thank you. I think the Director of Planning has answered some of my questions already. But, okay, I just had a couple of questions. So the overhang that we heard about concern at the APC, I understood that was also along the sides because there's other doorways that aren't at all protected along the sides of the building. And I think that was part of the concern, is that those were exposed and open. And so I thought that it was also to have more overhang on the sides of the buildings as well. And I just wondered if the applicant were to want to do that, whether there would be any issue given what's being approved today.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. So a minor change like adding a little bit of an overhang above a doorway would not require an amendment to the development permit. Oftentimes there are minor changes that have to be made in between the time that the development permit's approved and the building permit is issued, because this is a primarily form and character review. So sometimes windows shift a little bit, detailing and such. So in answer to your question, that would not require a DP change. And actually, it makes a lot of sense to have a little bit of an overhang protection for those side doorways.
Okay. Because I think at one time it was included in setbacks, and I don't know, maybe roof lines and whatnot, but that's fine. I just wanted to know who it would be that would making the decision about the trees, whether they would need to be removed or not.
Thank you. So that would be a few professionals would have input. You'd have the arborist, the engineer, and town staff, which would also include, the arborist and the engineer with also input from planning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just have a couple more. And it's not so much about this development, but just maybe the guidelines, because this is our first kick at the can, and I think it's just good to get a good understanding of how the guidelines are going to be applied going forward. So, like for instance, in the guidelines, it says preservation of natural features, clustering of parking to reduce pavement, parking to be screened. If the lot is adjacent to a lane, all parking shall be and/or accessed from the lane. Locate parking areas to the rear of the primary structure. Limit the extent of paved areas in front yards to encourage green spaces. So none of those things are being applied here. And I just wondered with the guidelines whether there's certain aspects of them that would take priority over other areas of the guidelines.
Thank you. That's a good question. And that is the challenge when interpreting things like development permit guidelines or policies. There's always trade-offs. And so those guidelines that you referenced, that's the reason that staff recommended that be referred to the Advisory Planning Commission, because if that driveway access in the front on First Avenue had been changed, there would have been more opportunity for more green space in the front. However, that would be a trade-off, less convenience and accessibility for the residents there in terms of their parking. So that's where we look for advisory groups like the Planning Commission to weigh in on, like, where do they feel about those trade-offs, and then ultimately a council determines whether the access and convenience for the residents is more important than, say, the not interrupting the sidewalk and providing a little more green space in the front. So So there's always a trade-off, and it's impossible to say, yes, this absolutely complies with the design guidelines, or no, it doesn't. There's always a little bit of a gray area, and that's why we get input from the Advisory Planning Commission. Thank you.
Two more quick ones. One, what I heard from the APC about the color, the white, is that if it were a bright white, it would bring attention to the massing. And so I had no idea there were so many shades of white until I went to pick out color for my trim. And of course, there's every shade of white you can imagine. So I think just having a more subdued shade of white would probably appease the concern of the APC. And then finally, I just want to say that I was really pleased with this proposal and all the thought that went into the mechanics of it, and the fact that they're aspiring to step code 5, I think is amazing. So congratulations and thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Vander.
Yes, thank you. Well, Councillor Skipsey has asked several of the questions that I was going to ask as well. I do agree with the recommendations of the APC in terms of how to better the design, particularly in terms of the roof line and the fact that it is such a small overhang, and it's a little bit difficult to see from the rendering that the roof actually is, the smaller roof line is actually just an imitation roof, shall we say. It's not actually, it's one big roof, and then there's a pretend roof. So it looks like one is in forward of the other, but that's not the case. It's just one big roof there. So I do have concerns about that. I understand the APC did ask about the parking, but what I was concerned with was more the streetscape, and they didn't really, perhaps because of what the recommendations, how the recommendations were stated, they didn't really look at the streetscape to the extent that I would have liked myself. I think basically it's a good design. It is something that we do need in the town, and it does satisfy a lot of the design considerations, design guidelines. But I would encourage the applicant to seriously consider making some of the changes that the APC did discuss, and perhaps taking a look at if there's future projects, because the spaces are quite small, 800 square feet, 810 square feet, and a lot of that is internal circulation, perhaps looking at 2 units on the main floor and 2 units up above, and then you could have all your parking accessed from the back. So that's just an aside, but I'm not quite sure how I feel about, should we say, yes, you have to follow those design guidelines in regard to the parking, or not. So I'm kind of, that's where I am right now.
All right. This was moved and seconded. So further discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Municipal operations. Who would like to start with that? And by the way, Mr. Sales, thank you and your staff for all the work you put in with the strategic planning session. For people who weren't here, it was an eye-opener for me. We've never done it like that before, but I really liked the way it was done, so, and how staff handled that. Thank you under your leadership, Ms. Rilla. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Worship. So I think my last on the list here. Anyways, this is a request from staff to get authorization from council to proceed with a grant submission to the BC Active Transportation Program in the amount of $500,000 to fund the Qualicum Secondary School Traffic Safety Enhancement Project. That project is located obviously in front of KSS and would include new sidewalks, some street parking, street lights, street trees, and an oil grit separator to filter the stormwater before it enters Schoolhouse Creek and subsequently flowing into Beach Creek. The project is listed as second highest priority on the community transportation plan, behind the traffic calming improvements on Highway 19A between Judges Row and Crescent Road West. It's a fairly costly project. It is estimated to cost about $1.9 million just for the surface works and the storm work. And I just want to make sure I'm clear that that does not include the installation of, or the replacement of the AC water main that would have to be done before the surface works were to be completed. So $1.9 million is being requested. At present, it's estimated to cost about $1.75 million. However, due to cost escalations, we've erred on the side of caution and are asking for $1.9 million at this point. There are insufficient funds in the reserves for this. So the project would be funded through a mix of long-term borrowing and the grant-dependent funding, as the current balance in the asset reserves is insufficient to cover the cost. The long-term borrowing, 10 years, would result in an annual debt servicing cost of $175,000, leading to a 1.5% property tax increase, or about $35 per year for the average household. Further to the cost of the project, the cost of the AC water main would be about $445,000. That's to replace 200 meters of 200 mil AC water main. So in total, the project would cost, including the underground, or including the AC water main, $2.345 million, of which $500,000 would be funded by the grant. So the recommendations are that Council authorizes the submission of the grant to the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Fund for $500,000, and that Council instructs staff to include a provision for long-term borrowing of $1.4 million in debt servicing costs funded from property taxation for the Qualicum secondary traffic safety enhancement project that we are hoping to include in the 2025 to 2029 financial plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions about that? Councillor Skipsey.
Okay. Having a student in grade 12, I know it is rather chaotic at drop-off and pickup time in that area. But I just had a couple questions about, one, why is the second-ranked project being chosen over the first-ranked? Like it seems, unless they're all being actioned at the same time, I'm not sure. And also, I just have a little bit of concern about the timing of this. So I'm wondering if the grant application is time-sensitive, because we're just going through our strategic planning and finance budgeting, trying to allocate funds for everything. And I'm just concerned that we don't know where we're at. Like, I don't have an idea exactly what the tax increase is going to look like at this point, and then to add this on top of it without knowing is just a bit concerning, because it could kind of just push it too high in my mind.
Right. So how time sensitive is the grant application?
Yeah, it's due on the 31st of this month.
Okay. I would, personally, I agree with what we're doing right now. We're just starting the financial planning next month, and where this all fits. Is this also, could this also be funded through the Growing Communities Fund that we got from the province?
So, Your Worship, the Growing Communities Fund has been fully allocated to projects that have been approved by or requested through council resolution. So there is no available funding currently to allocate to this project unless council were to reprioritize projects that are currently included in the financial plan.
Because there was a project that we were thinking about along Rupert Road, and we didn't proceed, and that was 1.2 million that would have come out of this. So that didn't go ahead, so why wouldn't that amount be applicable to this?
The Rupert Road water looping is a water infrastructure.
Not the water, no, the acquisition. We were going to use from the Corona Community Fund 1.2 million to advance our plan for the harmonization, and we didn't do that.
So, Your Worship, the project you're referring to, we will be bringing details on that forward in the budget discussions when we come forward. But that budget has just been, the timeline for that budget has been delayed. It has been pushed out. So we haven't removed it from the proposed financial plan that'll be coming forward.
Okay, this is a little bit awkward because the topic that I was referring to was an item that we discussed in camera because it involved land. So I'll have to do this talk with you separately and explain what I was thinking. In the meantime, we also have two councillors not here, and this is a significant step that has the implications of tax increase. This is a major project. It's not the number one, it's second. So I would also personally like to see more of a conceptual drawing of what's happening. Sometimes I get, quite frankly, blown away at how something is engineered and how much it costs to engineer. And I've seen some comparisons that were done differently, like the bridge at the Eagle Crest at our golf course. That came in far below as to what some engineering experts would have thought. So I like to take a look at this because we're talking a lot of money, and I want to see what we're actually getting for it. I think the public would have the right to know what we're getting for it as well. So I'm going to defer this to a future council meeting to consider all these implications. For as far as a grant application, I think we can do that because regardless, it's always a good idea if you have a grant in the hand. But then we may not use it exactly. Do we have to use that grant exactly what is being proposed, or can we, if we change the design of this project, do we then disqualify ourselves from this grant?
I'll jump in on that one. So when the town, if the town applies for this, we would be applying for this specific design. Grant funders are often somewhat flexible if the design changes a bit. But switching to an entirely different project, it would be more complicated, and sometimes they don't approve that.
No, not a different project, just a less expensive project. Thank you. Councillor Vander.
I don't really have anything else to add. I was a bit taken back with the detailed design work for this project commenced in 2016. And now we're being asked to make a decision within a week. So I agree that we need some more time.
Yes. So I don't want to put ourselves up for failure, but I need to know whether we apply for this grant and if we come with a less expensive concept of the same project in that same area, whether we would disqualify ourselves. Ms. Petronella.
Thank you, Your Worship. If there's uncertainty on Council's behalf about applying for the grant, the recommendation would be not to apply. If you need to dig into this more, certainly the reason it is time sensitive is because of that October 31st deadline. Council could decide to say hold and keep an eye out for the next grant that comes along. The reason this is the second project that is being recommended is exactly because of that detailed design. The first project, which is 19A, I believe, we don't have the detailed design for. So again, it's not grant application ready. This is number 2. The grant opened up, so staff felt an obligation to bring it forward to you. It's totally within your governance realm to say, no, not yet, we're not ready, and get ready for the next intake.
What was the number 1 on the list?
I can answer that. That is the Highway 19A traffic calming between Judges Row and Crescent Road West.
The traffic calming between Judges Row
On 19A, yeah.
Okay, because I thought at the top, in my opinion, it should be the roundabout at Village Way and the Island Highway that goes into Eagle Crest.
Correct. That is on the list. That is, it's in the top 5. I can't recall which one in the top 5 it is, though.
Because I think we've made a commitment to do this during this term, and when we've taken on these other projects, I feel like this one will fall off the list again. So I feel pressured to say, yes, we don't want to lose an opportunity to apply for a grant and hold up the work that since 2016 we said we need to do something about. I just never thought it would cost this much to deal with people dropping off the students, having some extra parking, a crosswalk. I don't quite understand why this costs so much, so I need to see the design. I'm sorry, I can't approve this right now. Thank you. So it wasn't moved and seconded? It was moved and seconded? No, no. So I would move that this will be deferred to a future meeting. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So that was it for today's meeting. Just an update, if I could, on East Crescent Culvert. How is it going, Mr. Watson?
It's going real well. I do believe the paving is happening today. There's a few items that still need to be completed before we open the road back up, but probably in the next couple of weeks we'll be getting to that point.
Great. And the job at First and the ball fields there?
Yeah, we're hoping to pave that on Monday. And I'm working on the thermoplast contractor to come in and put the crosswalk marks on after that. They might be able to do that next week. I haven't officially heard yet, but that's coming along well too. So that will be a raised crosswalk at that location.
Right. Thank you. Well, thank you for the update and all the work you're doing and your support for the strategic planning as well. Thank you. With that, and motion to adjourn, Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.